but it's perfectly clear that others need to step up and start playing their part as well.
And Seamus, obviously the Dáil has a lot of progress to make as well, just a handful out of 160 TDs. There has been a Taoiseach who's gay, of course. There's a minister in government who's gay, and then the proportion of women still in the mid-20s or thereabouts in the Dáil. What about your party, the SDLP?
I think we've made a significant amount of progress as a party, given where even we were a decade ago, and that's not because it has just kind of happened overnight. It has been because of hard work and engagement by members of our LGBT group and people getting involved in the party and fighting elections and making sure that our community actually has people to be able to look up to and say they represent me or my community, that they are someone that I can look up to and see if they can do it, then I can do it as well. And I think that's been something that's been very important for me. First time I stood for election in 2011, I was 19 and I wasn't out at that stage, or at least not to a great many number of people. And then the second time I stood for election, when I was elected first in 2019, I was out. I think there's a huge pressure put on you to make sure that you are providing some degree of that example to people, that young LGBT people in particular have a space and a role within public life, that there is a need for us to be around the tables where decisions are made, because if you are not at the table, you are going to be on the menu, and other people are going to be making those decisions on your behalf without your lived experience, without any sense of the struggles that we as a community have come through and the struggles that we still face. And I think the difference we've been able to show, not just in the SDLP, but in other parties working together on our community's issues, have been in places like Belfast City Council, where we have been able to secure significant investment for LGBT organisations, particularly throughout the pandemic. And those things simply wouldn't have happened had there not been queer people around the table. That's a reality. Had there not been people from our community, from various different political parties, my own included, at the table saying, this is what we need, I don't think those things would have happened. So I think there's an onus on all political parties to try and make sure that their party is representative and it looks like society, and that we have more women, more LGBT people, more people from an ethnic minority background, more people with disabilities coming forward and being engaged and involved in politics. I'm very proud that my colleague Pete Byrne, who was here last year, I don't think he's here this evening, is the first openly LGBT chair of the council in Uri Morningdown. He took up office the same night that Mickey took up office in Belfast. And similarly, in the point I've just made about having more people from an ethnic minority background, that my colleague Lillian Barr took up office as the Mayor of Derry, the first black mayor in Northern Ireland, and I think the first female black mayor in the whole of Ireland. So there's an onus on all of us in political parties, to make sure that we do what we can to make our parties representative.
Thank you very much. Carol Nickullen.
So we don't have openly gay members, MLAs, and I suppose as Seamus has said, but particularly the point that John made, I do think it matters, because if you can't see it, you can't be it. I firmly believe that. But, you know, the issue that I have is that, and that's not an issue, it's a good thing, Sinn Féin are putting and have had a position that put women in winnable seats for a long time now. So we have more female MLAs than males, but it's still not diverse enough, in my opinion, and it needs to be. And I do think that when it comes to issues, the only thing I would ask people is that, you know, for those of us who've got gay family members, that we bring our experience to the table as well. Seamus is right, it's not enough, but it is something. And certainly it was really evident to me, not just around the marriage equality issue, but it was particularly around adoption. Friends of the family came to me who couldn't adopt at the time, and I actually said to them, I can't adopt either. I'm a political ex-prisoner. I'm not allowed to adopt either. So when you looked at the barriers that faced particularly LGBTQ plus people, while I might have had a few, the heat was there. you know, right down to blood, adoption, the marriage equality issue, but even things like insurance and all those things that we all take for granted and get. So, come back to the question, do I want to see more diversity in the party? Yes, I do.
Thank you, Carol. And for the Ulster Unionists, Jeff?
Well, I was a councillor actually before Seamus, and 3 gay councillors elected that year. It was about 10 years ago now. So we were at it then, and
I beg your pardon.
we survived. And I don't want to take away from people's achievements, but there were gay events in City Hall in my time.
Yeah.
There were motions passed. There was discussions. Abortion was the big issue in that. When the Assembly was down, and I voted for the decriminalisation of abortion. So that things were moving along then, and still are, as we've heard. The Ulster Unionist Party is very much it's a broad church. People can join it and have their views within a relatively wide range of opinion. But I think the central opinion in the party is a sort of moderate and, dare I say, kind view of life. It may not be very militant, but I've never experienced any trouble in the nearly 20 years I've been in the party. And ultimately, it's all about selection. It's not about election. People, basically, donkeys get elected if they're put up by a party or don't, as the case may be. To get us selected is what matters. And nowadays, as you said yourself, William, 10% of MPs are gay. In Westminster, and in the Alliance Party, something like 17% or something are gay. So we've made it through the glass ceiling or the pink ceiling.
Why, though, in some parties or some traditions, but not so in others? I mean, we know that we all know gay politicians across the spectrum. We all know gay party members in all of the parties across the spectrum. But before you can get elected, you've got to get selected, right?
Well, I think one of the key words, maybe, and it's been used several times, is openly gay. I mean,
yes.
there may be. I'm sure Lord Mayor Murray is making a statement when he says that. The fact is that there are gay people in, as you know, they've been in the DUP. They've been. I mean, it's just amazing if you think of the number of crises and dramas and court cases that have been involved in the DUP, despite everything being suppressed and oppressed. I mean, going back to Aris Robinson, the leader's wife, having it away with a teenager, and that was not very Ulster, but it happens. It's country and western style, a lot of that.
No idea how we got to that point, but I'm going to be keeping my eye on you tonight. That's what I'm saying. All right.
Could I William,
please do, John.
Possibly
Save
give
us,
you,
please.
Maybe some lived experience of how inclusive things actually are rather than how we would like them to be. Because there is in politics across the globe, the capital cities, larger towns will have a different political demographic than other places. And here's your stark reality. Outside the cities of Belfast and probably Derry, there are entire council areas in this place. I know this because I come from one. I used to serve on it. And they make no reference at all, ever, to the fact that anybody's gay or black or quite often Catholic or Irish either. So what level of encouragement there is there for people at local level to get involved in civic life, put forward local issues, participate, engage with their politicians and put themselves forward as political candidates or public appointees? And there's the missing link. There are huge swathes of areas outside the city bubble, if you like, and I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, where people will be less likely to break through that barrier if they have never had any level of engagement or respect or acknowledgement from those in charge. So let's start there at local level and build up from that, and that will filter through to political parties. Of course, they should be doing their job, but acknowledge, please, there's almost an official rejection of people. In the council area that takes up most of my constituency, I have a small bit of Lisburn and Castlereagh at the south of my constituency, and the vast bulk of it, the remainder is Antrim and Newton Abbey. Just a year ago, colleagues of mine, new councillors, new younger councillors, were bringing forward a motion to fly the inclusive pride flag in the council. Most parties voted against that. The pride flag was flown for the first time. We'll never forget it. I talked earlier about the first time I was here as a panellist 6 years ago, and I left the building that night to hear that for the first time my local council had just decided to fly the pride flag, and that was a major breakthrough. It meant something to me. I know from the contact I got from other people that day and that night that it meant a huge amount to others as well. But flying a flag one day a year is not enough. The council, its services, its bodies, those especially responsible for public engagement, have to make an additional effort to make sure minorities and those marginalised in our community are engaged and respected and involved.
Thank you, John. Claire is here with a microphone somewhere in the middle. Claire's here actually with a microphone right down here. When you want to get involved, and I want to encourage you to get involved, please do. We've got some questions that have been submitted by members of the audience already, which I'll read to our panel, and we'll take it in groups, but I will create moments throughout the evening when you can do maverick stuff. Just go off away from the question, and if there's something you really want to ask, we'll make sure you get a chance tonight. So, first question from the audience: with numerous politicians across the UK now indulging in trans-exclusionary rhetoric and fringe groups seeking to divide our community, how are you challenging this damaging and worrying rise in transphobia? Who would like to go first? Seamus.
I think we are in a very dangerous position where trans people's lives are being used as an excuse for political arguments and political capital. Now, what I would point out and say is that for those who sought to try and make it a core plank of their election in Great Britain, they lost spectacularly. The Conservative Party decided to run on a platform that was so much so about culture wars, and it wasn't just about trans people, but it was about refugees. It was about basically everybody you could think about who might be considered being on the margins of society. And they were rejected quite heavily, to the extent that there was a significant amount of tactical voting across constituencies to make sure that Tory MPs weren't returned in a lot of places. So I think the cold, hard fact for any politician looking to engage in this type of whataboutery or trying to use culture wars as a way to win elections, it doesn't win you votes, it doesn't win you elections. It'll get you hits on social media, probably from some Russian bot farm somewhere that's going to help amplify what you're trying to say, or the odd crazy crank. Some of them are very kind enough to leave their accounts public enough that you can report them to the police. But it's not going to get you votes, because actually the vast majority of people are kind. They are perhaps not understanding, but open to understanding. They probably know very little about our lives as a community, but they're not obsessed about us in the way that some politicians think that they are.
Thank you, Seamus. Jeff.
Well, I have to say, and it may not be very popular, but I think it's a worry that the trans issue has now reached a sort of, it's become a test issue in society, whether you're good or bad. Are you for trans or against trans? And that's a danger, because the opposition to trans rights, if you want to call it that, is building up, and it's a broad church or a broad group. It includes feminists and radicals, Christians, right-wingers, and a lot of old-time gays. People, I made a list of people. I was surprised. Most of you wouldn't have heard of them, but people like Don Milligan, Robert Wintemute, Joanna Cherry, who's an MP or was, Richard Kirker, and Robert. Those are sensible people who have a past in gay activism. And so, you know, you can boo and think that that's bad, but you've got to engage in the argument and get the discussion up and running.
We're not an argument, they're people. You keep saying trans, but they're not trans, they're trans people.
Of course I know I'm talking about human beings.
Well, then add people to the end of the word trans.
Well,
Yeah.
I did use the word trans people at some point. So look, you can shout and scream as much as you want and interrupt, But the fact is, it's a big issue. It's not going to go away, and it's going to hurt the gay community unless we address it properly and carefully.
What does that suggest?
Well, let me bring the others in as
I'm
well.
concerned
if you
about
could
what does it mean
hang on a
to
minute,
address
Seamus, let me bring the others in as well. And if you could also wrap into this, I think, why are we seeing at this point? Why at this point in history are we seeing this culture war around trans people? I mean, trans people have been here all our lives and throughout history. Why now is there such a growth of this culture war? Yes, John.
Well, let us, if some of us could, look at ourselves for a moment. I expect there are people who are trans who, in certain circumstances at least, would be afraid to either be that or say that because of the conversation that's taking place nationally and internationally currently. And that brings us right back to the conversation we had at the start of this in 1984. Because prior to that, in 1983, I was 17, just aged myself there rightly. I'll retract later. I reserve the right to retract.
Your age is very well, John.
Look, you know what? I know how it feels, and this is not martyrdom because I had support and I have had the resilience and robustness to get on with it. Others didn't and don't. But I know what it's like to be afraid to say. And there'll be others in this room who can identify with this. Who you are and what you are and how much you want to be proud of what you are. So for me, if I can be, and I'm not being deliberately controversial, for some people I expect trans are the new target. Trans are to those who want to control and demean exactly what the gay community was a decade ago or 2 decades ago or a generation ago or whatever. This is a conversation often driven by the right and the intolerant. And it's about demonising people and alienating people and exercising control, and it has to be challenged at every level, especially when worst case scenarios about one person in one prison in one country are rolled out to scare the public. It has to be challenged in the interests of fairness in general, but also especially in the interests of our trans brothers and sisters and family who are as much a part of society and our community as anybody else.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Yes. Claire was nodding off in the middle of all. Claire, you get up there amongst those stairs so that we'll be able to bring some people in a second. Carol.
So I've seen this over the years with different marginalised groups. I'm not saying I've seen it and accept it, far from it. I do remember last year, Stand By Your Trans, but the kind of nasty rhetoric was well out before that. So, for example, when we talk about Section 75, right, you'll get people whose rights have been denied will automatically get what we're talking about, or people have been discriminated against, or have been abused physically, verbally, mentally, sexually, financially. And then you'll get others, sometimes within the community, who think that it's okay to have debates like Joanna Cherry and others who are, well educated and know a lot, but yet all don't know enough, right? And I do think that has been the case going back at least 6-7 years, where I've seen it around children and young people who wanted to go through gender identity services. I've seen the reference to, some minorities are okay, but others are just going too far. And I think it needs challenged, and it needs challenged head on. How people identify themselves is their business and nobody else's. Shanae. And they need their rights, and we need to make sure that those rights are there for everybody, regardless. So,
thank you very much.
As a legislator, that's the least that we can do.
Sorry, Carol. Go right ahead, Claire. And Peter. Go ahead.
Carl, could you tell me how you will?
Can we? If you've got the mic, you've got the floor. I'll come to you. Don't worry. We'll just try and keep it reasonably careful.
Hi, sorry.
I know this is a bit of a segue, but I will try to include. I'm going to try to include what's currently been happening into my question as well. Given that there has been an increasing influx of immigrants into Northern Ireland, giving some examples, students and young professionals who see Northern Ireland and especially Belfast as a source of both economic livability as well as an increasingly safer space for their queer lived experiences. However, given that they find themselves in kind of walking a tightrope or stuck between two very tight spaces, oftentimes they're isolated from their own communities because their communities may not be as tolerable of their queer, trans, or gay identities as they would be. I myself come from an Indian and a South Indian background. My community would not be as accepting. And similarly, the existing queer community in Northern Ireland is oftentimes rooted or having its roots in more traditional hierarchical and very bland practices that may not be accepting of queer immigrants. What are you as parties doing to either help them bridge the gap between these various communities, or how are you able to address the living standards and concerns of queer immigrants into Northern Ireland and Belfast?
Thank you very much. That was like a PhD dissertation, by the way. Brilliant question. I'm going to stick with the trans point that we're on, though. I will come back to it, though. I promise you, I will not forget it. Someone up the back. Can we just group some of these thoughts around transgender rights, just at this point, and then we'll move to other issues. Thank you.
Always me. Oh my God.
We always like it when people start with prayer. Don't worry, it's fine.
I sat here last year and embarrassed myself because I got really, really cross with Doug Beattie, if anyone in the room can remember. And I spent about a week afterwards just filled with shame that I allowed that man's hatred and bigotry to push me over the edge.
Well, look, he's not here, but he's not hateful, and he wasn't expressing bigotry. I was chairing the event last year, but I know
you were.
I just want to be fair. When someone's not here, let's not call them bigots.
No, but what I'm going to say is I left feeling really, really bad that I thought I lowered myself. Yeah. And yet I'm more angry sitting here now, which is really bizarre. The situation surrounding as a mother of a trans person,
sure.
What we're living with and dealing with is just. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 80s and how gay people were treated, and people keep saying it's the same thing. It's not. It's worse. It's absolutely horrendous. But after all that rant, I actually want to address Alliance today because I'm actually stunned that the people that I'm really pissed off are the Alliance Party right now. Wow. Because when we have Sinn Féin, we know exactly where they stand on the trans community. Love them or loathe them, they're supportive of the trans community and everyone knows that. When you have the DUP or UUP, we know how they stand. You know, they're very open and blatant about it, but when you have the likes of the Alliance Party, and they've always set themselves in the middle ground and always set themselves up to be supporters of the trans community. And yet 2 days after the CAS review came out, Stephen Farry stood up in Parliament and welcomed the CAS review and said he could not wait for it to be implemented, which was absolutely disgusting. Now, bear in mind it was 2 days after, and he probably hadn't read it and hadn't got sort of, a good dig down into that. That's excusable. I emailed him, haven't heard back, that's way back in April. But Progressive Politics put out a statement prior to the election. What? Questionnaire. Beg your pardon. Thank you, Lee.
Yeah.
And on that, there was 2 questions with reference to the LGBT community. And one was with reference conversion therapy, and every single Alliance person, you must have had a wee party discussion about it. You all answered yes to conversion therapy. But every single one of you, including me, and I'm glad he's not here tonight because I didn't want to be throwing this at him because he's a nice kid, but including him, every one of you sat on the fence with regards to trans healthcare. Every single one of you said, every single one of you sat on the fence. None of you were big enough, strong enough to stand up and say the trans community deserved decent healthcare like every other person. None of you all sat on the fence. You're being complicit in the murder of the trans community, and you should hang your heads in shame.
All right, John, you want to respond to that one directly, please?
First of all, and I'm not across all of the detail of that debate in the House of Commons whenever it took place, and I'm sure you'll understand that. But I think I was pretty clear on my position on the trans community just a few moments ago. That was my position a few moments ago. It is my position now. I could give you some pretty horrific stories I'm not going to breach any confidences here, of young people who came to me with their parents for help in needing trans healthcare, and were referred to by the Health Trust, local faith-based organisations or sites. Now, there are independent services being run on those sites.
Yeah.
Funny enough, we made this to fellow panel, the comment to a fellow panel member just at the start
John,
of tonight, example.
I don't want to break in too much, but could you address
here's
this question?
The real example.
What is your party's
We
position?
are working with those people all of the time, defending their right to access that healthcare when they come to us for help and in general through policies. I made it clear a moment ago. I can't be any clearer than what it was.
Can I?
There was no decision to do anything in particular. No, there obviously wasn't. I can assure you there wasn't.
All right.
There was no internal
does your
party
party
decision
have
to
an
do that.
official
I can-
position on the CAS review?
The position is that there are reviews that come forward on a regular basis that should be, by the very nature of the thing, considered in detail, and time should be taken.
So you have not
work
come
our way.
to a
Yeah, here's the
position.
position, William. And it's
What
quite
is
a
the
sim-
position?
Here's the position I took,
Yeah.
and I relayed this to people
Sure,
who
go
made
ahead.
queries. So try and do it verbatim for you. That the the conversation around trans issues had become particularly toxic, driven by the right. Comment I made earlier. We said clearly this conversation had to be, first of all, nuanced. It had to take most steer from more steer than it is currently from public or from medical opinion and expertise, but
Right.
especially from lived experience.
Okay,
I've
John,
answered
I'm
that.
gonna have
That is our position.
Sorry,
That
I'm
is
going to
the
have to move
position.
on.
That-
Can we
that
get a voice
is
from
the
someone
position.
who is transgender, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Over here. Thank you very much. Can we get the mic, please? Thank you very much.
I'm trans.
I'm sorry, you're trans as well. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go for it.
I'm trans, and I have a question about the views on the recent permanent ban on hormone blockers for under 18s. Currently, that was passed using the emergency power in the UK government. I have a question on your
That's-
views about that.
This is to do with puberty blockers?
Yes.
Puberty blockers. It was one of the questions. Thank you very much for moving us on. And I'm going to. It's one of your questions as well. It was one of the questions submitted. So, since it follows on from healthcare, let's go to it now. Wes Streeting, the health secretary, has already said he plans to make permanent what was a temporary ban on the prescribing of puberty blockers for trans young people under the age of 18. Make that permanent, both in the NHS and in private medicine. That is the position of the Labour Health Secretary. The question that many were asking is, and I'll come to you on this, Carol, what's Stormont going to do about this? What should Stormont do
Well,
about
what
it?
should Stormont do is they're responsible for their own. Their healthcare's devolved, so they should make their own laws. I mean, the Belfast Trust, so I support that. I also detest the fact that anyone seeking the gender identity services in the clinic have to go through CAMHS. I think
Yeah.
that's offensive. I think it's absolutely offensive. Like any access to healthcare by anyone, you go to your GP, if you need a referral to a particular service, that's it. So that's my position on that.
So,
And it's a-
is that your position or
no,
Sinn Féin's position?
no, it's the party's
So
position.
Sinn Féin's position is prescribing access to puberty blockers at any age under the age of 18? On
no.
clinical advice?
It's on clinical
On
advice.
clinical advice
It's
with
on
no
cli-
limit on
it's-
on
it's,
age.
It's on clinical advice.
That's helpful. All right, thank you.
So, and
Yes.
I think actually Emma cleared that up last year as well.
I don't think you could be any clearer.
Oh, good stuff. That's okay.
I just wanted to make it clear, but you'd be very clear. Jeff.
Well, it was our Minister, Robin Swan, who followed suit to the government in Westminster on stopping the use of puberty blockers for under 18-year-olds. And I think there was a one
Let's listen to the
caveat for
answers.
research, but as we know, Robin is no longer the Minister of Health, Mike Nesbitt is now, but the Wes Streeting decision is obviously such that I don't see the Stormont Assembly in any form changing that decision, and it's one to stay, and I think it's the right decision.
I'll get the mic again. I think.
Hello.
I've got a question down here. A follow-up. Is this a follow-up question?
A statement.
Can I just get the mic, please?
Yeah.
Let's grab the mic. You've been wanting to make a comment for a while. Guys, can we all just take a deep breath? Can everybody just take a deep breath? All right. So let me try to give a bit of advice to the room. This is a conversation. I hope it's a safe space for a good conversation. You're going to hear things you disagree with. You're not going to learn unless you listen when people disagree with you. There are different views across the spectrum on this, just as within the gay community, there were different views on same-sex marriage, on the blood ban, on adoption. I interviewed many gay people who opposed all of those changes. There was division across those issues. But listening is the way in which we understand what the arguments are. So please, work with me. Over here.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I think I just want to clarify that trans people have always been here. Trans people have been consistently here throughout history, particularly in Northern Irish history as well. I think I could maybe listen to people debate the trans topic when I don't see young trans children being murdered in their schools, such as Brianna. Whenever a 16-year-old girl is stabbed to death because she's trans, whenever a trans person is put between two impossible places to justify their existence and to justify their right to transition is shameful. And the idea that we debate this is also shameful. We are just trying to live our lives, and I don't think that's too radical.
Yeah.
And I've started Mid Ulster Pride in the middle of nowhere, and I've done some pretty interesting things. But trying to live as a trans person is the hardest thing that I have right now.
Good, okay.
And that's just my position on
I
it.
understand that.
Like, fair play, Sinead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're still on this question of puberty blockers for young trans people. Seamus, what's the SDLP position on this?
I thought I was in the audience there for a minute. I have not had an opportunity to come in and chip in on this. Look,
Now, don't be bitchy. Come on.
William, I mean,
I've known you too long. I know
It
what
is
you
an quality
like.
for me. It's very difficult to not be. And we're a little bit, I suppose, more relaxed here in what we can say compared
That's
to
all right. Go ahead.
the Talkback studio. Look, I said very clearly last year I was of the view that there has to be some form of clinical involvement. I think very similar to what Carol has just said. And I do stand by that view, but I think there are very significant issues with the CAS review and with the positions that have been taken by politicians in GB as a result of that. And I think there have been issues exposed around the lack of input from people with lived experience, which we wouldn't see in many other types of reviews in relation to healthcare. And I think there are significant issues in relation to the expertise that were relied upon and the fact that one single person was commissioned to pursue this particular review. There are a lot of questions that I do not think have been properly answered in relation to this, and I don't think it's a firm footing or grounding to make policy decisions on in relation to trans people, and particularly in relation to trans young people. I also think there's a huge series of contradictions that we're saying that it's okay to prescribe puberty blockers to certain types of young people but not others. So if your medical condition is related to one particular thing, go ahead, fire on. We're not going to ban you from pursuing this particular line of treatment. But if it's in relation to another, then sorry, you're not going to be able to get the chance to move forward. I think the other thing that hasn't been properly mentioned this evening so far is that we're putting young trans people, and when I say young trans people, I'm talking mostly in the cases that I've dealt with and people who have come to us through our constituency offices and people have come and seeking advice. You're talking about teenagers, you're talking about people who, at my age, when I knew very firmly what my identity was, and I had a very fair idea that I was gay and that I wasn't straight, that these people, these young trans people, are being denied an opportunity of any other type of gender affirming healthcare, because the waiting lists for services here are so long, and I know that that's partially an issue as well in GB too, but it is particularly an issue here, where it has been neglected and left behind for so long that effectively you're saying to young trans people, well, there is no option for you other than if you have the money to afford to go private. And I have helped people
and
I know.
that option's going to go away for young people in the West Streeting proposal, because it would cover
blockers,
private as well. So
but
just to be absolutely clear about this, is this the SDLP position? Because it sounds like what you're saying is very close to what Carol was saying. Are you saying the SDLP's position is that you will support the prescription of puberty blockers to all young people, regardless of age, entirely on clinical need basis?
So there's a process answer to this, which is that we haven't had a party policy.
So that is not the SDLP
We haven't
position.
had a party policy decision, a party conference. We have done certain things in the House of Commons where we have, for instance, voted against the British government intervening in the Scottish government decision.
Why don't you have a position on this?
Because, as I said, we haven't had
You've got two
policy.
MPs. Why don't you have a position on
We
this?
haven't had a policy decision. taken
Sinn Féin
at
has a
party
policy
conference.
position. Why don't you have a
They
policy
have a different
position?
policy making.
But have you never got round to it?
We're
It's
a
been
democratic
around for a
party,
while.
We take decisions at a party conference.
Does the Alliance
But
Party have
I've
a
been
party
very
position
clear-
on this? What's your position?
It's similar to that outline. That
Similar or the
these
same?
services and facilities should be available
All ages?
based on, and let's use the word medical need rather than clinical need for this reason.
Fair enough.
One aspect of this, and I mentioned earlier, having dealt with some pretty harrowing experiences at constituency level.
Yeah.
Well, I've dealt with a number, but one or two in particular were very, very troubling. And the one thing we haven't mentioned, and this really jumped out at me.
John, can you focus on,
the-
please, the Alliance Party position? When you say it's similar, where is it different?
That the service should be available, absolutely, yes.
Without any regard to age.
And I'm going to explain
Without
that.
any regard to age?
Based on medical advice.
But
and
without any
expertise.
limits on age?
For this reason, we are generalising beyond belief. And I was about to say there, the one thing we haven't touched on here specifically in relation to all of this is the mental health aspect of all of this. People are already traumatised often by their circumstances, further troubled by the waiting lists that they're confronted with when they go to seek help. And then that's compounded by this sort of almost confrontational conversation about what's right and what's wrong in general. There are individual circumstances for every single person involved in
Right,
this.
so you
And we
fully
need-
disagree with the West Streeting position?
Absolutely, yes.
As a party?
Yes.
And your position for the Health Unions is it's a reasonable position, the
Well,
West.
just to follow on from our
Yeah.
position already, Robin Swan adopted the previous government's position that they should not be used.
So a ban on the use of puberty blockers under the age of 18?
Yep.
And that's your position?
Over.
All right. Over here, I'm going to need another microphone. Oh, God, Claire, you're there. You're ghosting me. You're ghosting me. Go right
Coming
ahead.
out of nowhere there. But hello, I have experience in the under 18 service. I originally was referred to COI whenever I was 15, and I was seeking transition even from that age and even younger. I have known myself very well from I was about 13, but that's whenever it was very cemented that I wanted to transition. But even at the time, those services were very bare bones. There was no treatment options whatsoever for me whenever I was there to access hormone blockers. And towards the end, they essentially told me that I would have to wait the 5 years to see the adult services without any sort of intervention in between that would stop puberty from taking hold, essentially.
Yeah.
Later on, I actually accessed private treatment, which was incredibly life-saving for someone like me, because my dysphoria would have affected me quite badly. What my concern is that young people that would have been like me are going to have to go through puberty and suffer like I did, and I do not want this to happen to them at all.
And could you say a little bit more about what that suffering would involve or has involved?
I was extremely suicidal because I was dysphoric, and transitioning has saved my life. I actually went for top surgery last year. And that in itself is an extremely long waiting list, which needs to be tackled. On top of that, getting access to puberty blockers young means these people don't have to go through puberty and suffer. Because I'm sure you're all aware of the suicide statistics in the trans community and what that is exactly linked to, because there have been people that have died on the waiting list waiting for life-saving treatment. Whilst there may be mental health components, it should not be the model. Due to the whole informed consent basis thing, which a lot of places should be beginning to adopt due to the ICD having updated gender dysphoria to gender incognizance.
Yeah.
Is there anything, especially yourself, Jeff, what would you say to someone like me?
I think it's a much more complicated issue than maybe you're indicating there. That it's a position that the whole trans issue, if you want to call it that, has come on in the last 6 or 7, 10 years. The numbers of young people attending clinics or wishing to attend has switched in gender, for starters, or sex, I should say, from male to female. And there's something going on that is such that the young people have to be very carefully assessed before they can be allowed or entitled to have drugs that will prevent puberty and have long-term effects beyond just stopping puberty. And the whole suicidal issue, I think the statistics are very faulty that you may be quoting or suggesting. I've read exactly the opposite statistics. So it's, and I'm going to say something that's going to annoy the life out of you. There is a problem, the joke in the Tavistock Clinic, by the end of this work that we're doing on trans people, we'll de-gay the community. And that is a fact. That is a fact. There are young people that are being driven by a modishness into...
All right, yes, please do. And then, is that Alexa up there? Yeah, we're going to come to you after that.
Firstly, Jeff, directly to address you, trans people have always been by our sides. Stonewall was one. Even before that, trans people have always existed in native cultures like Two-Spirit people. They've always existed and they've always been with our community and they've stood
I'm aware of that.
by us. There's no such thing as trans in the gay way. Trans people know exactly who they are, and a trans man does not take away my gayness or my queerness if I date a trans man. Just like if a cis man was to date a trans woman, that does not take away him being a straight man. Now, I am from a unionist background. I have supported unionist MLAs and MPs. I've also supported Alliance, SDLP, and Green Party. I would vote to whoever candidate supports my community. The other thing I was addressing, you were talking about mental health. Yes, mental health in the LGBT community is extremely poor, and that's because we live through daily discrimination, like what happens in our street 3 or 4 times a week, every week for the past 4 years. We've been called faggots, we've been called groomers every single day, and nothing gets done to address that hate speech aside from that. So yes, mental health service here is atrocious. The waiting list to get on it, the facilities for it, so severely underfunded, and every single health minister that I've been aware of has not done enough. We have been talking about mental health strategies for years and years and years, and every time there's a vote on it, the DUP and even some UUP MLAs voted against it because it has an LGBTQ plus.
Thank you. Can we push that mic way up to the top there? Jeff, I think he was addressing that to you. Do you want to quickly respond?
I mean, I've been a friend of the trans community. I'm sure you know, some of my best friends are trans, and that's true. It's not a crime to have a friend who's a trans person. I've been working with trans people both on a social and political level for 30 years. So we have big issues, and I'm aware of it. I spoke at the first Trans Pride rally in Belfast. I'm sure you don't know that, but there you go. The fact is that I am particularly concerned about the medicalisation of trans. I think that's an issue that should be reassessed, inspected, because I don't think it's necessarily a medical issue, but that's the process that people are sent down in a sort of compromise to cope with the problems or the issues that occur. So I'm willing and able to help out and do important things, but I'm not going to take this notion of murder. It's just a nonsense. It's an exaggeration that is going to work against you. That's the problem.
Jeff, on that medicalisation, just 1 second. Do you then support taking doctors out of the identification
I think
journey?
that needs to be looked at
So
in
self-ID,
in a calm
essentially.
way. That it's
You would
not
support
necessarily. It
self-ID.
isn't necessarily being trans is not necessarily a medical condition.
No, I get it, but does that mean you would support self-ID as they have in the law in the Republic since 2015?
No, I don't as such, but I do think that there are ways that the whole medicalisation can be adjusted. Yes. And
So
nobody else seems to
I'm
think
confused.
that, so.
If you take the doctors out, you get self-ID, don't you?
Well, I wouldn't say take them out, but there's some middle way that can be pursued.
Keep one of the doctors in?
Who knows?
All right, okay. Up the back, Alexa.
Hi. So just thank you so much, all of you, for coming out. I know it can be quite a tough crowd, but I think it's worthwhile.
We've got
that we having
comedy
these
after this,
discussions.
Alexa.
And I just wanted to get a few facts straight in the room because there's a lot of discourse here around puberty blockers and around healthcare access and things like that. And I want to make sure that we actually know what we're talking about. So in the lifetime of the Knowing Our Identity service, I think it's under 100 or under 150 young people have ever been prescribed puberty blockers in Northern Ireland. That stopped in 2020, not because of the CAS review or because of any decision in the UK, but it was because of a lack of capacity in the adult gender identity clinic. Despite what has been said, there has been no ban on puberty blockers in Northern Ireland passed by any of our health ministers. There has been a suggestion, but it hasn't been followed through on. So just wanted to clear all that up. My concern is primarily that when we're talking about trans healthcare, there's this really laser focus on, well, when should trans people be able to access this? What age brackets should we have for puberty blockers for this or for that? And there's not enough focus on the fact that the waiting list basically hasn't moved in 7 years. 7 years. I've been on the waiting list since January 2018 for care. I'm a trans woman. I've been living as a trans woman for all of those years and more. And I'm still being denied care, and countless trans people across Northern Ireland are being denied this care. So we talk about puberty blockers and banning this stuff and throwing around all of this, oh, it's dangerous and we're rushing kids through this process. Kids can't access this healthcare. This isn't, and this isn't directed at any one particular person up here, but it's directed at all of the political parties and all of the politicians who have power over this. We can't keep continuing this discourse as though trans people have literally any access to gender-affirming care in Northern Ireland. It's a false dichotomy. It's a false line of questioning. It's a false issue that's being raised because fundamentally the crisis has reached such a fever pitch that having discussions around banning puberty blockers or not banning puberty blockers is irrelevant because no one's getting them anyway. So my question to you is why, when issues around trans communities are raised within the Assembly or within Westminster or wherever, why is there so much whataboutery around puberty blockers and around age brackets and around things like that when we can actually be really clear in saying, actually, trans people don't have access to care, and that's bad.
I'd like to think, Alexa, that what I said earlier reflects what you've said because I've listened to you talk about it so much that it has really quite sunk into me that there isn't, and perhaps that shows a successful sign of a lobbyist, that politicians are repeating back your lines to you. But it is very clear to me that there isn't any of the kind of follow-on services that come after that point or that decision about referring somebody to a gender identity clinic or puberty blockers or anything else like that. It just doesn't exist here. And therefore it is a red herring to continue to have the conversation about the issue of puberty blockers. Well, it doesn't exist because the service has effectively collapsed because there isn't enough investment in it. There clearly, my understanding is that there's been issues about retaining clinical leads because you have to try and bring in, there's very few people who are trained in specialities that are needed for the gender identity clinic in Northern Ireland, so you're trying to bring people in either from GB or from somewhere else. And there have been a whole range of issues. Sorry, I can't see who's talking at me because I'm kind of blinded by the lights. So
Just shout that out again, please.
No, I'm just talking about personal and public involvement. It was, all health trusts signed up in 2009 for participate in bringing people from communities, especially minority communities, in
Right.
Yeah.
developing systems and processes around them.
And systems and processes. But systems and processes are great if you actually have the services being able to be set up to deliver them. And we've had the same issue in relation to abortion and to reproductive rights, where you've had the legalisation of abortion in Northern Ireland, but we didn't have the standing up of services.
Right.
And so there's been a consistent challenge there, which is we can talk lots of nice things, but unless we're actually in a delivery focus and actually be able to stand up services to deliver for people, they're just not going to exist. The reason why this conversation, I said this earlier, the reason why this conversation continues, so I think out of politeness you'll let me finish. I think out of politeness you'll let me finish. Thank you. I think the challenge that we've seen, look, mate, if you want to get a mandate and be down on the stage here as a politician, please run for election. We as a panel have been asked a very direct question, and I'm trying to give an answer in relation to that. I said earlier on that there's a challenge in this place and in other places where politicians who want to try and seek votes use our community, and they're using trans people as a way to try and get votes. And they use them by abusing people, I seen one candidate from a particular unionist party running Facebook ads during the election saying that they knew what a woman was. That is the kind of stuff that we have seen where our community has been placed in the firing line in order to try and help people win votes.
All right,
That's why we have conversations about puberty blockers, and we have conversations about what age should somebody start transitioning. In the same way as 20 years ago, we used to have conversations about what age does someone know that they're gay, what age does someone know that they're bi. These things are used to scare and to spook people, the people who are in the unknown section of the public, who don't know about our lived experiences, who don't know about our lives, and who are therefore being preyed upon by politicians who want to use us as a wedge issue. Our responsibility, all of us as a community, is to step up and say that that should not be allowed to happen. Some of it is going to involve difficult conversations, like the marriage referendum did, where we're going to have to humanise ourselves to people. But politicians are using us. We have to make sure that they're not allowed
Any
to.
final comment on this, John?
Very quick one, because another gap there that we haven't quite filled is the one thing that whatever number of reports, whatever number of conversations that you have, the one thing that has to exist to deliver, whoever is holding the ministerial position, is the political will to deliver. It's quite simple. If the political will isn't there to start with, and I'm not singling any minister, past or present out here, but political will is the driving force to do this, and probably in our system has to be political agreement, of course. But if that doesn't exist to start with, then that's why the situation hasn't got better, because other services have changed, have been more nuanced, have been reprioritised. This clearly hasn't been, and that's the issue.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to the next question suggested by the audience. The next question suggested by the audience. I'm moving on to that, please. Yeah. Was someone speaking?
Sorry.
I am so sorry.
No, you're
My
right.
apologies. You're all in the dark over there. I didn't see you. Go right ahead.
It's all right.
Forgive me.
So I just don't believe that you care that much about what we're putting in underage trans people, because you've been pumping full of hormones women for the longest time with birth control. That, may I remind everyone, has the most side effects of anything in this world, and we take that religiously to not get pregnant because you don't want us to get pregnant. Not because you don't want us to get pregnant, but there's no real... I also embarrass myself when I talk a lot.
No, I've no dog in that race at all, but thank you.
No, but what I mean is, as a society, we pump women full of medicine.
Yeah.
That hasn't really been studied since forever. We've just discovered that tampons and period control things have lots of chemicals in them, and we're now talking, and this has been forever, and we've now talking that you don't think that it's safe for trans kids to get hormones. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. first. And second, we are here discussing LGBTQ plus community, but we're only hating on trans people for existing, and we're inviting people here that don't support the trans community. I just don't understand that. I really don't.
Well,
Cheers.
what we've done is we've invited all the political parties. 4 have accepted the invitation. Oh, I'm sorry. We've invited 5 political parties. Is that right? Look, I'm not involved in inviting anybody. So, Kirsty, this is on you, right? We invited 5 so-called executive parties, even though one of them is no longer an executive party, it's in opposition. But they have the leader of the opposition. 4 accepted. They sent along their representatives, and we're glad to have them. Let's be polite to our guests in the room. I'm moving to my next question, and it's suggested by the audience. In the recent King's Speech, the UK government announced a full ban on conversion therapy. What are you and your party doing to ensure that this ban covers Northern Ireland and that it is fully inclusive and that there are no exemptions or opt-outs? Carol.
Thank you. So this ban should have been in years ago, to be frank. The so-called conversion therapy it's just offensive. It's dangerous. It's unregulated. It's based on religion. And it's pathetic, and it should have been brought in a long time ago. I'm glad the speech included a ban on conversion therapy, absolutely. And this is where it's going to get contentious, because you'll get some of those in the Assembly who will use it as a way of talking about their pastors, their whatever, and try and conflate the 2 issues. We just need to be clear about what conversion therapy is and the impact that it has.
So just to be clear, the phrase often used these days is conversion practices rather than simply therapy, because that sounds like it's a psychological context.
Yeah.
You would support as a party no opt-outs even in terms of religion. If someone wants to go to their minister or priest and ask for prayer to stop being gay, you would still have that in the ban, would you?
Well, it's not the same thing. I mean, like, to be honest, William, it is not. If someone wants to go and get spiritual guidance, that's between them. But spiritual guidance or religion has no and should never have any place in the state. We are legislators. We're legislators.
Carol, I don't think it's about whether religion has a place in the state. On the Stormont debate recently, the question was whether a ban on conversion practices would be the state extending its reach into churches to ban practices that would be happening in some churches. Would you support that ban on some practices within some churches, some of which are pretty adventurous practices, right? I mean, someone goes along for exorcism to stop being gay, that kind of thing. In another case, somebody goes just and has prayer. But some people want to ban that. I wonder what your party thinks.
I don't think anybody's banning prayer. So we just need to take the nonsense out of this. You know, it's a red herring. But this other stuff, exorcism and that, I mean, that is just complete crap. It's complete crap, right?
Right.
Now,
so you ban that, would you? You ban the exorcism?
Yeah, well, yeah. Exercise what?
Well, you're obviously not a Pentecostal, let me just say. John, your views.
Yeah,
there are some Protestant churches that do it. There are some Catholic churches that do it.
I don't know enough about that.
Yeah, well, there are.
It's
a long history. There are people who have gone through. There are people who have gone through so-called spiritual deliverance, who have talked about the psychological harm that they've experienced. Many gay Christians have this experience in a church context. Some of whom are calling for a ban on that. The state says you churches will not be allowed to do that in the future. Do you support that ban or not? Or would you want no options, no opt-outs whatsoever? That's the question. No opt-outs whatsoever.
First of all, we need to strip away some of the untruths and mistruths around this. First of all, the right to practice religion is already protected in law. Yes. There is no need for that to include deliberate mechanisms to make people suppress who they are or inflict that upon them or try to stop them being free to, in the first instance, express themselves and to simply be themselves. But let's strip away to start with. The church stroke faith religion element of this is already protected by law. Those people who have been targeted by conversion therapy, and there's been lots and lots of evidence that this is a very harmful practice, we have to think of those people, and we have to try to stop, through legislation if necessary, and in my opinion it's necessary, to stop that happening to other people in very worrying, stressful circumstances where they're very far removed from statutory authorities, professional opinion and other interventions. So, excuse me, short answer, yes, we should legislate for it. It's my understanding that my colleague Owen Tennyson is planning to bring a private member's bill if the Assembly doesn't do it in general through legislation.
With no religious opt-outs.
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a ban on this practice.
I'm not debating. I just want to be clear what you're saying. That's all. I'm just going to get clarity.
I've made clear that the faith and religious elements of all of this are already protected by law, and no one is seeking to change that.
Jeff?
Well, we've got to define what it is. I mean, that's where legislation becomes exceptionally difficult. What is conversion therapy? What is illegal currently, so that doesn't need to be covered by it? And it's really critical that any bill does not fall foul of the European Convention on Human Rights, the freedom of expression, freedom of religion articles. Though there undoubtedly will be test cases brought by people on those very grounds, and they are quite fussy about the freedom of religion and freedom of expression. So, you don't want to be stomping into this like a bull in a china shop. It has to be thought through. And it's pretty obvious that Westminster is, the new government is very careful about it. They're very cautious. There's some talk that Scotland may ask to be included in the Westminster Bill, and I would think actually it might be a very good idea for Northern Ireland to ask to be included in the Westminster Bill, because the chances of getting the bill through Stormont are zero. So that's an important factor that's got to be taken into account. But I'd like to read a wee bit from the Labour government's proposals. It says, the government wants to ensure the criminal law offers protection from these abusive practices while also preserving the freedom for people and those supporting them to explore their sexual orientation and gender identity. This will mean those providing medical care and support are in no way impacted by the bill. We're clear any ban must not cover legitimate psychological support, treatment or non-directive counselling. It must also respect the important role that teachers, religious leaders, parents and carers can have. So you can already recognise that it'll be a very slim bill and it will be outlawing a very restricted set of practices.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on this? Seamus?
Actually, funny enough, following on from what Jeff has said, we as a party have had conversations with the Northern Ireland office about whether or not there will be scope or potential for extending the legislation that comes through Westminster for Northern Ireland. Am I terribly delighted about the idea that we have to pursue legislation in this way for our rights again? No, but I am realistic to the fact that we are probably going to see attempts to wreck any kind of ban coming through the Assembly. And I remember whenever this was discussed in the lifetime of the last Assembly, being named by Jim Wells on the floor of the Assembly, myself and Owen Tennyson, and some of the terrible things that were said about us, some of the conversations and discussions that took place on broadcast media about whether or not we were trying to ban prayer and all of this ridiculous nonsense. I think we just have to be very clear about this. Anything that is going to put people through conversion practices, that is going to subject people to this form of hate, should be outlawed. It should not be allowed to proceed, and people should not be left in a very vulnerable position. So we'll be working to make sure that whatever avenue comes through, whether it is through the extension of the bill at Westminster or whether it is through something in the Assembly, that we see a ban on conversion practices in Northern Ireland, and that is a very fulsome ban in its totality.
We have lots of hands in the air. I'll go up there. I think we're in the kind of like maverick space as well, so please don't let me limit you to just this topic, but jump in on this topic as well.
It was great to hear that conversion therapy has been included in King's speech, but what I found within Stormont, especially when it comes to change within the LGBT community, a lot of the changes come from Westminster because Stormont basically isn't doing their job. They're basically fighting amongst themselves. When is Stormont actually going to implement that conversion therapy is banned in Northern Ireland, and what are you going to do about it?
Right, I'm going to leave that hanging in the air because nobody knows the answer to that question, and it may sit on the shelf for years, or Westminster might do it. Down here, and I'm coming to you as well, and I haven't forgotten your question. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten your question. Yeah, we'll alternate, shall we? Go ahead.
Hiya. Yeah, I'm just sort of. Sorry, it's weird with the microphone.
I know it's weird, isn't it? Welcome to my life.
I find like the not just necessarily just trans, but just the LGBT community in general.
Yeah.
There's this. It's almost like synonymous with mental health issues, you know, and the fact that it's treated that way, you know, like I know someone who they had to have supervised contact with their child because they had to prove that they were a real trans woman, you know. And I mean, she had someone in jeans and a t-shirt telling her she wasn't dressing feminine enough, you know. And I suppose my sort of thing is, to me, there's a really obvious solution to this, to like, and actually I wrote about it in my final assignment, like, part of me thinks it starts with education to a point. Like, my son, you know, in 2020, we were getting these videos sent, and this teacher was reading a storybook, and she goes, okay, boys and girls. I'm like, why can't you just keep it genderless, you know? Because you're forcing little kids, you know, because my boy has male genitals, or my child has male genitals, he's a boy, you know? Why can't, you know, and he's forced to sit with the boys. Why, well, if he wants, he loves pink, fluffy things, and he loves unicorns, and he loves nothing more than like prancing about, you know, and he loves wearing dresses, you know. Since he's been 2 years old, he's loved wearing dresses, and it's always like, but at home I let him have that. At school it's, you're a boy, you know, and to just from nursery school just be like children, kids, you know, just and
well,
I think.
It sounds like he's very lucky to have such a
something-
supportive mother, actually.
I mean, is that something realistically that could be done? I don't know, like to change, because you mentioned about teachers being a part of that change. Is that something that could be done to make education, I suppose, a gender-free zone?
A gender-free zone?
To just be, you know, let the kid just be a kid, you know?
Well, we do have this RSE debate as well,
Yes.
though I'm not sure I've got much time for it, but it would take in gender and sexuality as part of the conversation. We'll switch over here. Yes, I'll go to this this person here, then I'll come back to you. Don't worry, I'm coming back to you. Yeah.
So I have two questions kind of in one here. Lights going. Yeah, just light there. So I work with young people in West Belfast. I know you're talking about the division between church and state and church and policy and politics. If, for example, we are teaching children who may be a little bit older about LGBT, about gender identity, we are not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to engage in that type of conversation because the school is attached to a particular faith. So it becomes a conflict between the education system and churches nearly indirectly. I would ask political parties, is there any way around that? Is there any strategies to combat that, where we can create a more inclusive curriculum and more inclusive approach to educating children about gender identities?
Thank you very much. Carol, quick response on that one.
The issue is that there should be a standardised curriculum, regardless of the religious background or complexion or context of any services, be that education, be that youth work. That needs to happen, and I believe it should be conditional. So you can't just take the EA's money but ditch the EA's guidelines and rules. You shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Let's just stay here with the mic.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think for me anyway, there'd have to be some sort of an LGBT plus strategy in the Assembly that can deal with all these histories holistically, because they're all interconnected, whether it's conversion therapy or whatever. And in terms of hate crime, a lot of people say to me, oh, but the gays, they have their rights, but we may have the rights, but the attitudes aren't there yet. I mean, I suffered hate crime there a few years ago. I was in a straight bar, having a gay night, of course, so I thought, okay, it's a straight bar, they're having a gay night, and of course I had homophobic abuse said to me, so I just sort of feel, unless I'm in some sort of a gay zone, you're not safe to be openly gay, and I feel certainly some sort of an LGBT plus strategy that can deal with all these issues, tackle hate crime, get a ban of conversion therapy would be probably the way forward in all this as well.
Thank you very much. Just behind you there, yeah.
We've been waiting on a sexual orientation strategy in 2007 from the executive, so it's 2024. And just to be clear on the RSE curriculum, it is the EA's guidelines that say that it should be taught within the school's ethos.
Yeah, and can I also say,
Carol?
The DUP blocked the sexual orientation strategy, the anti-poverty strategy, the disability strategy, the sexual orientation, poverty, Irish language, the whole lot. So let's be clear about where it was blocked. Rachel? Thank you. No, they did. And I think the other thing what we need to do is, as well, I mean, the point that Michael, isn't it, Michael, I can hardly see, but I mean, it is 2024. The point is completely valid that any community, any group should be asking their government for rights, and one group or maybe two can say no, and that's exactly what happened with the Bill of Rights. It was the most depressing debate I've been at ever. And given the context that those rights have been blocked from 2007, and we're now sitting at 2024 with the DUP minister responsible for bringing those social strategies forward, responsible for bringing equality forward, I would ask respectfully, and I am saying this respectfully, that people need to make their voices heard, because I thought there was a lot of power in Gaeilge, marriage equality, and even some of the legacy groups all came together to support each other because there was a denial of rights. And this, in 2024, needs to be sorted out. So regardless of what's coming from England, and I mean this sincerely, I want us to legislate. I want us to legislate ourselves. And I don't want it to be done on the basis of a cross-community vote.
Very brief, John, please.
I'll come back to that Bill of Rights thing, but if I may say to part of the question asked by the previous question there on education, I think it's something we didn't pick up on here. Some of us belong to political parties that do think there's a way from the influence on educating children that was referred to. The Alliance Party has had for a very long time a position that children should be taught in the same way, in the same place, whatever their background, and it's called integrated education. And the facts show that something like 70% of people support that position, and 6 or 7% of people have the ability to avail of that position. So there's where a huge amount of work is done from separating state and church and all of those things by making the provisional equal and to everyone in the same place. On the Bill of Rights issue, this is a fundamental to, and I can't let this go because I've had this conversation in recent days a number of times with people. I think I referenced at the start about being who you are, having the right to be who you are, enjoying who you are, and being protected by law for who you are. That's what the Bill of Rights has to be about. And there's various strands of what we have talked about tonight, not least of all the trans community, who deserve the protection of that from the state through a Bill of Rights.
Wasn't that in the Good Friday Agreement?
Yes. I think
1998, and you're worried about a strategy that's been there since 2007.
There was a committee.
No, the commitment to it is in the Good Friday Agreement.
Okay.
You've got to read agreements as they actually tell
They
you.
evolve, yeah, of course.
Some work was done, but it hasn't.
It was
All right, no, we
a
don't-
promise to
okay.
look into the matter. It wasn't.
Thank you. They promised to look into it. All right, go on. Get back to us when you've thought it through.
Hi, so my name is Paula Clark, and I'm representative of the Northern Ireland Deaf LGBTQIA+ community here. So we're starting that process at the moment. We're not official, but we have a community for ourselves at the minute. We're hoping to get more official. We don't have any access to anything at the minute. We don't have any access to sign language for deaf people and what we're doing. But my question is, what I would like to see for each of you and for Northern Ireland politics then is representatives for, that's more open, like especially specialists, like for deaf people. Where's the expertise here? I think it's really important that we're represented in the right way and you're speaking to our community and making sure that our voice is heard as well, different communities as well. We should be having the expert advisors with you guys. Where are they? Are they advising you on it in politics? We have politics who are selected and they're put into these areas, but do they have them expertise in that area or do they not? Or are you actually communicating with people who have these expertise? I think we need to make sure that we have these and that we know that we're talking about things that are actually real life, like you're talking about the real life examples as well.
Yeah.
And I think making the best decisions for our community because you're having expert opinions, it's in there.
Thank you.
And then it means less time everybody debating things that they don't really know.
It's wonderfully old-fashioned, experts. Wouldn't it be great to have more experts? Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I think we need more
Thank you.
more
Yes.
voice for our communities.
Quick response, Seamus?
Empathy as well, sorry.
Empathy and experts.
Yeah. Well, empathy is something that is too often lacking in politics here.
Yeah.
I think that's
You could fix most things with empathy and experts, couldn't you?
Well, I think understanding of people and showing some degree of empathy will allow most people to understand the personal circumstances
Thank
that
you very
everybody's
much.
in terms of actually engaging with the community, I'd like to get a conversation started with your group once you're up and constituted about what Belfast City Council can do to support you, because as a collective, all of the LGBT councillors in the council have worked very hard to reach out to all of the different groups within our queer community to make sure that they are both represented, but also that they can avail of support that the council can offer.
Get his card
so
before he leaves.
Yeah,
All right.
please do
I've only got 3-4
conversation
minutes left, and I have promised you so many times I'm coming to you and we haven't, and I have promised you I will come back to your question about immigration, which we will right after this. Oh, you want another question? All right, fine.
Hi, I'm just about tired of this conversation. I'm tired of all conversations regarding this. No harm, but I'm especially tired of the fact that so many testimonies have come out to tell everyone that conversion therapy is bad. And here we are, it's 2024 again, and we're still talking about it. Like, testimonies have come out, just listen to them. Stop using us as your political propaganda thing. We're not interested in it. We're not. We already know who is in our side and who isn't, so stop using our lives, because it's our lives, as your propaganda. We don't care, and no harm. We already know, and no harm to all gay man abroad, everywhere. But like, we already know you exist. We do. You are everywhere.
Yeah.
Every fucking word. Sorry for the
That's all
language,
right. Yeah.
but like, bi people exist, trans people exist, lesbians exist, pansexual people exist.
Sure.
And I'm just trying
I think you're
to
preaching
tell
to
you
the crowd, by the way, but yes.
Well, sorry.
I think you're preaching to the crowd tonight, but yes.
No, I have looked at the crowd, and I know a few people here, and I feel like looking at you down there, you can see the problem. Like, there's one woman, a gay man, and then I don't understand this. Like, I don't understand why we can't find women that are also bisexual, lesbians. Like, we exist, we're here.
I'm sure.
And this is not a dig at Carol at all. Like,
No.
for our folks to her.
Carol ticks so many boxes.
I'm just saying, we understand you exist, and also
Yeah.
I think that you
Yeah.
are also very tired of being the image of the LGBTQ plus community.
They aren't. No, they never get fed up. No. They
Far-
love it. They love it. We've got an audience. We've got lights. The only thing that can improve this would be some feather boas and some music. Honestly, they love it. Thank you very much. At a disco ball. This is going to be the last. Oh, nearly last. Go ahead. Not a PhD thesis, though.
Got it.
Question. All right.
Sorry. It was quite nicely put forward by one of the panel members of the need to understand political will. So this is a question to pretty much test that political will and help us all understand where you stand. And if this is fundamentally answered, then all of your policy decisions in the future should reflect that. Do you believe, and this is for everyone, do you believe that trans people have the right to individual responsibility, decision, and dignity or not? That's it. It's a simple yes or no question. Do you believe trans people, non-binary folk, and queer people have the right to individual responsibility, decision, and dignity of life? Please, that's all we want to know.
And that's a yes or no answer.
That should be yes or no.
All right, let's do it. John.
Because if it gets as complex as this is a multifaceted discussion, that's an answer.
Yeah.
We know what you mean by that.
I know.
It
But
should be yes or no.
the problem is that so many people could answer your question yes, and then still disagree on all the policy issues going through Parliament. That's the problem, right? But I suspect everybody in this panel will say yes to that question. Yes. Everybody. And well, let's try it. Yes. Jeff?
That's the best part. It's a win-win.
Jeff?
Yes, but I take
Oh,
your point.
yes, but.
I take
Yes,
your
but.
point.
Okay, I take it back. I take it back.
Having said that, really, we're not much further on because it's the issues and the day-to-day problems and disputes that are bringing us here. We're all agreed on that position now.
Right. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Are we still fabulous? Do we still love each other? You said you're fabulous at the beginning. Can you say you're fabulous again now, please? To the person beside you. Good. Right. And a deep breath. And listen, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. It may be a bit painful on the way, but we'll get there. Last question. Brief answers. Who is the most inspiring LGBTQ person or ally within your own political tradition? All right. I know this is going to be a difficult question for Alliance. We don't know your political tradition.
Then my own political...
No, it's all right.
Well,
all right.
I'm going to have to say Mickey Murray, considering you said...
The love of the truth.
My life will be hell if I don't, and I may
Right.
not get out of the building. Mickey, thank you for all that you've done, all that you do, and you owe me one for that one, okay?
Okay. I thought you might have said Plato, Aristotle, or something. No, Mickey Murray. Mickey Murray. All right. The legend of the Alliance centrist position. Jeff.
Well, I've already mentioned Montgomery Hyde, so that's within my own political tradition.
MP for North Belfast.
He was indeed in the 1950s, and he wrote one of the best books on homosexuality, The Other Love. And he wasn't gay himself, well, he was married 3 times, so I suspect he wasn't trying to cover up or anything like that.
No, and a great scholar of Oscar Wilde as well.
He wrote books on Oscar Wilde, sex, spying, and Oscar Wilde.
He outraged people of his day.
And Roger Casement.
Yeah.
He was a controversialist, a sort of kindly old buffer as well.
He was. Everybody should know Montgomery Hyde. Fascinating character. Carol.
Mary Ellen Campbell.
Tell us more.
Mary Ellen Campbell was the first openly gay deputy mayor, and she drove the whole awareness and compassion, and also the debate for legal rights in the party. And just on a personal level, I just want to say my brother, who left here when he was 17, told me dad he was gay, got bullied and left. And he just, for me, he's one of the most courageous people I know. So I can't say Mary Ellen without saying Tony.
Fantastic. All right. Brilliant. Seamus.
I think the SDLP is kind of spoiled for choice in the sense that we always have P.A. McLaughlin, who was very
You said
proud.
that last year.
Yeah, he was a very proud member of the SDLP.
I'm demanding a different answer.
And a former chair of the SDLP South Belfast branch.
Yeah. Old mate of Jeff Dudgeon's.
And you know, someone who I think a lot of this community has to look up to in terms of the things that he helped work for and deliver at a very difficult time. I would also say there's someone who always stands out in my mind as a lady who sadly is not with us anymore, called Geraldine Donnelly, who was a councillor in South Armagh. Geraldine was exactly what a lot of people I think would expect to be someone who may not necessarily have been on our side in the 90s and the early 2000s, from a very conservative part of the country, from a very conservative background, but who was incredibly supportive in the establishment of Newry Pride and in the establishment of our own events in Newry as part of Pride, and someone who used, understandably, their power as an ally and their space to actually stand up and defend our community and make sure that we had a voice and a space. And that is what it takes, is ordinary people
amongst all of our communities stepping up and making sure that people are human to one another. And Geraldine did that perfectly, and I'm very sad that we don't have her with us anymore.
Very much, Seamus. Worth also saying that Seamus was named Politician of the Year this year in the Pride Awards. So he may be somebody else's answer. Would you think this wonderful panel? Aren't they great? Lovely. Hug each other all the way to the bar. Sorry to stand in your way of a drink. Enjoy. Thank you for coming.